Session 3 goes into more details looking at how homophobia affects heterosexuals. Psychological internal effects. I begin by looking at the psychological or internal effects. Heterosexuals do not internalize an inferior or stigmatized identity regarding their sexuality. On the contrary, they internalize messages which tell them they have a superior sexual identity, which results in high self-esteem. They may, however, have internalized a stigmatized identity in relation to their race, gender, disability, class, etc. Heterosexuals are not dealing with the demons of internalized homophobia during adolescence. They have not realized that they are lesbian, gay, or bisexual. They are not in conflict between their emerging natural desires and the desire to fit in or to be normal and accepted. They can simply get on with being straight, developing their social skills, relationship skills, communication skills, getting on with their education and exams. Heterosexuals internalize negative messages about homosexuality. All this can, and often does, affect their attitudes and behaviour towards lesbian, gay and bisexual people. Attitudes. The British Social Attitudes Survey has been regularly conducted for many years. The findings show that attitudes towards same-sex relationships have significantly changed. For example, in 1983, 50% of people surveyed believed that sexual relationships between people of the same sex was always wrong. As a result of the AIDS crisis, this rose to 59% in 1985. By 1989, it had dropped a point to 58%, but by 2013, it had dropped significantly to 22%. Moripol, 2001. Just to throw some more light on attitudes towards different groups, the 2001 Moripol of 1,693 adults found that 95% acknowledged the existence of prejudice against minority groups. 36% said they held no prejudice against any minority. 64% said they were prejudiced against at least one group. Of these, there was a 16% hardcore who said they were prejudiced towards 3 or more minority groups. The surveyors also found a strong correlation between those people holding homophobic and racist views. There have been several surveys to identify which people hold more homophobic views than others. Back in 1984 in the USA, one researcher found people with more homophobic views had less personal contact with lesbians and gays, believed in a conservative religious ideology, held traditional views about sex roles, and were more likely to have grown up in a rural area, be older, and be less well educated. A more recent study by Stonewall in Britain found people with more homophobic views were more likely to be men, live outside of London, belong to social classes A, B and D, E, and be uneducated Tory voters and older. They were also more likely to read the Times, Telegraph, Daily Mail and belong to the Church of England. Influences. In a Moripol of 2001, people were asked what influenced them most. Their responses were television, 32%, newspapers, 29%, parents, 26%, religious beliefs, 26%, and friends, 19%. I think it's worth pointing out that neither education nor law nor medicine were included. I'm now going to show a few extracts from television which I put together quite a few years ago. They reveal the beliefs and attitudes of individuals, as well as showing how the media perpetuates homophobia. For every hard-fought campaign to get rid of homophobic legislation and replace it with anti-discriminatory legislation, there's been a backlash promoted in part by the media. American research has found a link between these backlashes seen in the media and the mental health of LGBTs.
Before I retired, I spent about 20 years doing a great deal of work for a lot of young people, boys and girls between the ages of 14 and 18. And in all that time, I never had the slightest inkling from any one of them of any predilection towards homosexual practices. And even now, I don't see 16-year-old boys parading in the streets demanding the right to go penetrating each other. What I do see is middle-aged actors. They're the ones who are campaigning for the right to stand outside of school and take away 16-year-old schoolboys to penetrate them for their own sexual...
Yes, I believe it is. When I was 14, I was sexually molested by an adult, and I'm still very, very angry about that experience. And I feel your legislation that you propose is going to give the wrong message to these people.
But that's a criminal act. That's a criminal act.
I want you to deter these people. I do not want you to encourage them. My two sons go to an all-boys school in North London. I want there to be a clear-cut understanding that in that school that there should be no homosexual behaviour. If there is, I want the headmaster to expel the boys.
Why? Why?
Because I want there to be no misunderstanding.
Why?
And the parents of the children at that school want there to be no misunderstanding. And I want you, as the government of this country, to give that headmaster support.
But you're saying these people are like mutants. I mean, you're sort of saying as if they're like... and that's how it sounds to me, I'm afraid, you know? I mean, I was actually sexually abused as a child as well.
Yes.
By an older man. And,
are you angry about it?
I was, yeah, very angry about it. But I managed to get over that, and I don't think that he was actually bisexual. So, you know, I wouldn't tar everyone with the same brush, you know.
These men should be deterred, and you should pass legislation which
Young men. It's neither natural nor normal homosexual activity. Consequently, one has to recognise that it is normal and natural to reproduce, and that's why the age of consent for women is 16, because a woman can reproduce at the age of 16. A boy will never reproduce.
It just doesn't work. You can't go near them. If you don't like homosexuals, you don't like them. You can't go near them. Oh, hang on, I can't work with this person here. And that's the way I feel about it.
Say, for example, it was my turn to get washed. I couldn't trust to stand there naked having a wash, knowing that one or two of them homosexuals might be having a bit, they might be having a bit of a high off it, you know. It wouldn't work.
At the end of the day, they may be the same sex as us, but if they're going to view you, if they're not going to view you sort of as just a person, they're viewing you as more than that. It is disruptive, yes.
So if it is publicised and it does come into force, like, you'll get a lot of the feminine type of people, the real clutch in the handbag type thing, and that's the thing that we can't afford to have in the armed forces. They'll do public relations, no good at all. How can you trust the RAF, for instance, defending your country if they're all clutching a handbag, walking down the street arm in arm with a boyfriend?
People's beliefs and attitudes can affect their behaviour. This usually begins in school. Homophobic bullying is rife in schools across Britain, with only a handful tackling the problem. At the same time, there's little positive information about LGBTs in schools. This is the effect not only of condoning homophobic abuse, but of creating the homophobes for the future. The 2012 Stonewall School report found that 55% of LGBT young people had experienced homophobic bullying, with 99% hearing homophobic language. Youth Chances is the most important survey of young LGBTs in England to date. They surveyed over 7,000 young people aged between 16 and 25 and published their findings in January 2014. They found that 63% of the LGBTQ, that's questioning participants, had experienced name-calling compared to 31% of the heterosexual control group. They also found that 18% of LGBTQ young people had experienced a physical attack at school compared to 7% of the heterosexual control group. The National Foundation for Educational Research Teacher Voice Omnibus Survey of February 2010 asked 1,700 secondary school teachers which groups in their schools were the subject of bullying. 8% said boys, 10% girls, 15% transgenders, 46% lesbians, gays and bisexuals, 25% disabled, 19% ethnic minority, and 11% based on religion. The same teachers were asked which groups their schools promoted respect for. 68% said boys, 70% girls, 7% transgender, 16% lesbians, gays and bisexuals, 81% disabled, 67% ethnic minorities, and 53% religion. Finally, the teachers were asked which groups were seen by them as feeling supported in schools. Their responses were 39% boys, 43% girls, 7% transgender, 14% LGBs, 78% disabled, 47% ethnic minority, and 37% religion. It's quite clear from this that LGBT young people were more likely to be bullied, that the schools were less likely to promote respect for LGBT young people, and that they were less likely to be supported in school. If the homophobic attitudes and behaviour of children is not challenged in school, it is likely to continue into adulthood. People with less power are likely to act out their beliefs with hate crime, and it's important to remember there's hate crime against all oppressed groups. The Gay British Crime Survey, conducted in 2013 with 2,500 lesbian, gay and bisexual people across Britain, found that 1 in 10 had experienced a physical assault, 1 in 5 experienced violence or force, 1 in 8 had experienced unwanted sexual contact, 1 in 8 had their home, vehicle or property vandalised, and 8 in 10 who suffered a hate incident experienced harassment, insults and intimidation. People who have more power are able to use their power to play out their beliefs. For example, in 1994, Dr. Colin Newman, who was the Executive Secretary of the British Psychological Society, was quoted in The Guardian. He said, "By accepting a section devoted to the study of lesbianism, the Society will be given a public signal that it endorses behaviour which, by the biblical standards they personally seek to follow, is incompatible with their own standards of morality." Because of this, it took a further 4 years for BPS to set up a lesbian, gay and bisexual section. More recently, there have been many instances where MPs and other powerful people, in particular religious leaders, have opposed legal rights being introduced for LGBT people. In 2013, there were debates on same-sex marriage in both Houses of Parliament, which were played out in the media. More airtime was given by the BBC to opponents of same-sex marriage, and complaints about this were more or less ignored. Head teachers have a responsibility to ensure their schools are safe places for all their pupils, but the majority do nothing about homophobia. A recent study by Plymouth University and the Manchester Business School, published in January 2014, conducted research on discrimination and bullying in the workplace. They found that 1 in 10 LGBs have been subjected to discrimination in the last year, compared to 1 in 20 heterosexuals. Lesbian and bisexual women were more likely to be victimised. A third were bullied on a weekly or daily basis. 44% said someone senior was the perpetrator of the abuse. Parents are also in a position of power. They often put pressure on children to conform to heterosexuality and gender roles by using verbal and psychological pressure. Sometimes they also use physical and sometimes sexual abuse. Many LGBT young people are either thrown out of home by their parents, or they leave home because of their parents' homophobia. It's estimated that a quarter of all homeless young people are LGBT. The majority of parents are unable to support their children when they most need it, that is, when they come into terms with their sexual orientation or gender identity. I'd like to conclude session 3 with an exercise and then a video clip. The exercise was developed by A. Elfin Moses and Robert O. Hawkins Jr. It is designed to help you identify your personal homophobia. Question 1. Do you stop yourself from doing or saying certain things because someone might think you're gay or lesbian? Question 2. Do you ever intentionally do or say things so that people will think that you are non-gay? Question 3. Do you believe that gays or lesbians can influence others to become homosexual? Question 4. Do you think someone could influence you to change your sexual and affectional preference? Question 5. If you are a parent, how would you feel about having a lesbian daughter or a gay son, or a bisexual child, or a child who is transgender? Question 6. How do you think you would feel if you discovered that one of your parents or parental figures or a brother or sister were gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender? Question 7. Are there any jobs, positions or professions that you think LGBTs should be barred from holding or entering? Question 8. Would you go to a doctor whom you knew or believed to be LGBT if that person were of a different gender from you, if that person were of the same gender as you? Question 9. Would you wear a badge that says, "How dare you assume that I'm heterosexual"? Question 10. Can you think of 3 positive aspects of a gay or lesbian lifestyle? And the final question, 11. Can you think of 3 negative aspects of a non-gay lifestyle? Finally, I'd like you to go back to the description in YouTube for this session, where you'll find a link to a very powerful trailer for the film For the Bible Tells Me So. Please click on this link and watch this short but very powerful trailer. Thank you.